So
All right.
we'll call the December 1st, 2021 ZBA meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we get a roll call, please? Judy?
Okay, that's me. Okay. So Ryan Buckley,
Here. Be
Liz,
sure to say where your content is from. As part of your
Apologize.
roll call.
Ryan Buckley present, Union Township, Isabella County.
okay, and Liz Presnell,
Liz Presnell here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Andy Tyson,
Here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Judy Lannon here, Union Township, Isabella County. And is that the whole group? I think.
I think that's it for tonight.
Yep.
And Brandon was excused. Thanks, Judy. Moving on to approval of the agenda. I assume everyone's had a chance to review tonight's agenda. If there are no comments or questions about the agenda, I'd take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion, Judy. Do we have support?
Support.
Support, Ryan. Any discussion? If none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
No one's opposed. Motion carries to approve the agenda. Correspondence and board reports. I think the big item here is board and commission expiration dates. If you look in our packet, we can see we have some vacancies, obviously, for our full seat, and then we have Brandon as an alternate, but we would need another. I know that I have offered a suggestion that maybe we pull Brandon into a permanent seat and asked that we find some other alternates. I'm not sure if that will happen or not. It was just a suggestion, but as always, if anyone knows of anybody that is interested in serving the community, please encourage them to do so. Do we have any other information as far as correspondence or board reports? Ryan, do you have anything from the PC?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a few updates here. We've the Planning Commission has been working in recent months, just kind of reviewing a number of site plans. One of the larger site plans that we reviewed in recent months was a site plan for the new county jail that would be located off Isabella there. There was some discussion and some perhaps spirited discussion on some of the conditions that were placed on the site plan there. Rodney may be able to give an update. I'm not sure that the jail has met all those conditions yet, but we had made an approval with conditions. We had also, in the past few meetings, we'd also had some reviews that we had done of some amended language to our zoning ordinance. Those were kind of reviewed with us and submitted to the board for their review, as well as most recently we had some conversation, not in regards specifically to zoning ordinance, but just provided some feedback on some updated language for both our private road ordinance as well as our sidewalk ordinance, or I should say our sidewalk committee and our policy and process there.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Any other information from staff relative to this topic?
Well, I guess with regards to the jail, I can simply share that they have met some of their conditions of approval for the final site plan. And at this point, we're just waiting for the remaining outside agency approvals that are needed.
Okay. Thank you, Ronnie. Moving to item 6, Would anyone offer a motion to approve minutes from our September 1st meeting, provided that we don't have any changes? So does anyone see any changes? If not, I would take the motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion, Liz. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Judy.
Second, Judy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes of the September 1st regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't believe so. Motion carries. And we are on to item 7. This is our public comment. Reminder, public comment is restricted to 3 minutes, and it's regarding issues that are not on this current agenda. Rodney, do we have any members of the public joining that you can see?
The only person that's here, the only attendee is Mr. Beebe, the applicant for this evening.
And I presume at this point, if Mr. Beebe has any public comment for items not on this agenda, he would notify us by raising his hand. And if he has not done so, we will have opened and closed public comment at 7:09. And that takes us to item 8, which is new business. We have a variance request 21-02. Applicant requests an 8-foot setback variance from section 7.5 C2D requirements for a detached accessory building at 2257 East Broomfield Road, a 1 acre B4 general business district parcel in the southwest quarter of section 21. We will conduct a public hearing and take updates after an introduction from staff and the applicant, and then we will be deliberating to either approve, deny, approve with conditions, or postpone action. So Rodney, can you offer an introduction, or Peter, on this particular topic?
I can do that. You have the application materials before you in our report dated November the 23rd. This is a commercial site. It's an office, but it wasn't always a commercial site. As noted in our report, in the history of the parcel, this plot of land was originally part of a larger rural residential agricultural parcel. It was divided off and sold to the current owner, Mr. Beebe. And the property is zoned B4, general business. It has been zoned that way. It's kind of a split zoning if you look at the larger area where the frontage on Broomfield is zone B4. This variance came up through a minor site plan process where Mr. Beebe was proposing several improvements to the property that you can see on the plans that were included. Among those include the accessory building that's a subject of variance, but also some covered parking improvements and other elements, lighting and some other details that were being taken care of on the site. The site is considered to be what's called a non-conforming site under our ordinance. That simply means it was developed prior to the current standards being applied under our current zoning ordinance. And we have a provision in the ordinance for non-conforming sites that allows improvements to that property that don't fix everything, but certain details have to be fixed. And so that's when it references a non-conforming site in the site plans you have before you. Those are the items that were being addressed. Overall, the plan met the requirements with the exception of this outbuilding, this cold storage building, as it's referred to on the plans. So that's what triggered the need for this variance, was that part of the minor site plan was denied by the zoning administrator. The other detail I would just make note of in our report is related to building permit. You may see some of that information from Mr. Beebe. And of course, in our report, there was a previous building permit for a similar size building at the same location as proposed. This was done under the previous ordinance. It was also done as essentially a residential accessory structure, which had a different set of rules that applied to it at the time. That building permit was granted, but the building was never constructed, and so that permit eventually expired. And as noted in the various items of correspondence in your packet, it could not be renewed. And so that's what led to this variance process. With that, I'm happy to answer questions as we go along and go through the public hearing process.
Thank you, Rodney. Members of the board, does anyone have any questions for Rodney before we start?
No.
Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for PBAR 21-02 at 7:13 p.m. At this time, I would like to hear from the applicant. If you could give us your perspective on your request for this variance item. Rodney, if you could unmute the applicant.
I'm actually moving him over to be a panelist. And that's in process right now. Just for a moment. All right, I've asked Mr. Beebe to unmute, and the floor is his.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay. Like to cover a couple things that Rodney has stated. Stated that the building was not a commercial building. Anyone that's been in the area for the last 3 decades, this building's been utilized as a commercial building. It's been a comic book store. It was an engineering office before I bought it. He happened to be a geological engineer. What he was putting the building up for and installed that concrete pad was for use with his business. So yes, it's been part of an overall property. It was not divided out until I purchased it. But to say that the building has been a residential use, it really hasn't been since it was first installed. So I differ in opinion there with Mr. Danny. It's been a commercial use for as many years as I've been around. I've been around 25. So what I'm looking at doing is putting an accessory structure in. That my building sits within the setbacks right now. And in order to, if I were to try and just extend off and put another bay on the building, which I talked to the building inspector, he wouldn't have a problem with that, but I'd unfortunately be expanding the principal use in a side yard setback. I'd have to jut that building out in order to try and do that, which is in your report. I think Rodney states that we've got the setbacks shown at 20 feet, but this district is now 10. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Is the condition still there in regards to if you're adjacent to residential, that it expands?
Yes, the provisions are still there for that. The numbers have changed there a little bit as well, but yes, it still is an issue.
And technically, we are adjacent to residential. If you're familiar with the area, that's where Pat McGurk has got one of his storage yards. Probably never going to be used as residential, but it's technically zoned residential. So I've got some difficulties expanding the building. I need to be able to take what's currently in the garage portion and get it out so that I have the ability to expand internally. I have 2 garage door bays if you've stopped out to look at the building. The first, if you were to go inside, I've had to move all my files for surveying and engineering, the accounting portion, I only have to keep 7 years. Everything else I have to keep forever. So my files just continue to grow and grow and grow. That first bay of the garage is all paper files right now. So I really am in need of space. And so what I'd like to do is take everything that's in the most northern bay and get it into this storage building. What I'm looking at is a 16 by 28. The existing pad that's out there that was put in by the previous owner is 18 by 30. So I would be setting the building on that existing pad. I've talked to the building department. They don't have an issue from building code to reduce the setback from 10 foot to 2 foot. There's nothing in the building code that's going to cause me a problem. So it truly comes down to the zoning. The zoning has a section that says the accessory building is supposed to be 10 feet from the principal structure. I can meet the setback from the property line, which is 5 feet. I'll actually be about 7. The contour of the property gives some problems. It grades from Broomfield Road north and slowly grades down. The drainage of the parking lot goes off to the north end of the property. But when you get to where that concrete pad is, it drops off approximately 6 feet in about a 12-foot area. So I've got a fairly severe slope there that I'm working with. So I really can't push it back any farther. If I push it back farther, I have to take it down into the next lower flat area, which is going to be a fair distance away from where my building is, and kind of defeats the idea of moving the stuff from the garage to an adjacent building. So I'm hoping that, with variances, there has to be some practical difficulty. My lot is such that the contours of the lot don't allow me to expand that extra 8 feet. I would be down that slope. I'd have to fill that whole area in. That happens to also be where my septic tank is, at the bottom of that slope. So I would have some difficulties trying to fill that in. So I'm hoping that you'll see the sense in being able to utilize that existing concrete pad and allow me to put it's going to be built as a temporary structure. It's not in a fixed structure. It'll be built and set on that pad. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Anyone from the board have questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm curious, just a few things for satisfy my curiosity. The permanent files that you have to keep for life, are you legally bound to keep those in paper form, or is that something that can be stored in digital form? I don't know that it's necessarily. I'm just kind of curious as to, in terms of the space that you're using. I'm also curious as to how far, if you were to place this structure somewhere else on the parcel, you mentioned that it would be further away from the existing structure. I'm curious as to how much further away that would be.
It'd be at least 50 feet away and down the hill.
Okay.
And then I'd have to figure out how to get some type of drive down to it.
At a 6-foot grade?
I'd have to figure out a way to get from that upper level to the lower level and be able to drive drive down it. Yes.
Right.
And as far as the files go, a lot of our drawings are, you know, the 24 by 36. We have those in CAD, but all the correspondence that come and everything else, technically, yeah, I could probably get a company to come in and try and scan everything in those files. But that's not something that we started. Business has been going for 22 years now. So it would be a monumental job to get that done.
Are those the only questions from?
I had a couple
Ryan?
of questions for Rodney, but I was going to give people an opportunity to ask Mr. Beebe if he had any additional questions.
Anyone else have questions for the applicant? Okay, anyone have questions for staff?
I do.
Go for it.
My first question is that Rodney, you had mentioned that, well, Mr. Beebe kind of opened his conversation by pointing out that the location had been used for commercial purposes over the past 20 years. I've been living almost next door, and I know that there's been businesses in there. I'm curious as to whether or not its previous use as a business is kind of, how is that germane to this conversation? The fact that it has been used as a business previously versus being residential, or being viewed as residential, does that change any of the conversation we're having here today, or is there anything that's a particular importance in making that distinction?
It really isn't, as it applies to the accessory building, the proposed cold storage building. That actually was what I was referring to. I was not talking about Mr. Beebe's office building as being residential otherwise. It has been around a long time. I was referring to the building permit that was issued in 2018 and what it was issued for. Now, maybe the person that pulled that permit intended it to be for something other than residential, but it was pulled under that category initially. So, no, but the standards that apply to accessory buildings today don't really look at the use. The setback standard and such is the same, whether it had been residential or commercial in this case. So,
okay. I was also wondering too, if you could just give us your thoughts, Rodney, on, I'm looking at kind of the staff assessment here, portions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just for the sake of, I guess, my own benefit, as well as, the rest of the members here, when we talk about doing substantial justice to the applicant and other property owners, what is that, in your own words, what does that mean when we're talking about, because I know the assessment here says that it is doing justice to the applicant, it's not doing justice to other property owners, but what in terms of us using that as a criteria for looking at a variance, what does that practically mean?
well, this is probably the most challenging and most subjective of the 4 criteria. All 4 of them are definitely a judgment call. They're all subjective in some form, but this concept of substantial justice is truly a subjective choice on your part. It's easy to see how granting a variance would provide substantial justice to the applicant. Obviously, it'd be much easier for them to, and less expensive for him to build the building he would like to do, and he is able to build it where he'd like to have it. The question of substantial justice to other property owners, first and foremost, looks at what about the neighbors? What about people around? Well, in this case, there are very few neighbors, essentially, as Mr. Beebe mentioned. Pat McGurk's property to the west, there's no residence there. There's no, it's a hill, essentially. There are very few neighbors. So from that perspective, that can be certainly part of your consideration is, are there is this justified for the neighbors as well? We looked at beyond that as well in terms of looking at, are we granting a special privilege to Mr. Beebe that that's not available to others, that it's kind of going beyond really trying to address a practical difficulty. This, to some extent, this gets into, is there really a practical difficulty with complying with the ordinance or not? And so, because a variance can, if granted for what amounts to an inconvenience, can really be something where it's not granting substantial justice to others who are required to comply with the ordinance. It's giving a privilege to Mr. Beebe that others don't enjoy. Ultimately, though, this is truly a judgment call on your part, to look at for just, is it right? That word justice, you can consider, is it right to grant the variance both for Mr. Beebe and for others that may be affected in some way?
Right. So in a sense, if I'm comparing it, generally speaking, when we're talking about setbacks or something like that, I think about like my own driveway. I have a pull-off cement parking pad that is literally right at the setback line to my neighbor. If I wanted to put a barn over that, or if I wanted to put a structure over that, then it's a question of, when we're talking about township wide, it's a question of, would we be doing justice maybe to people that might want to do that, I guess, or right. Okay, I see. That's what I have, my questions.
Anyone else have questions for staff?
So what would be the inconvenience to relocate it to another part of the property that would make it in compliance of zoning laws?
As the applicant stated, Judy, he would be moving it to a different location, 6 feet lower in grade than what it's currently proposed at. So you'd have to build some kind of driveway to access it, and it would be located as an accessory building further away from the principal building. So some 50 feet is what he previously said. So approximately 50 feet away and 6 feet lower.
Okay.
I would make one quick note on that. He was referring to moving this building north on the lot, and obviously referenced that there's a substantial drop in grade as you go north, and part of that was because of some fill that was put in for that concrete pad that also steepened the grade to the north of it. There are other locations on this site where this building could be constructed. It could be moved to the east. Now that may not be convenient for Mr. Beebe because he would like to put the covered parking right next to that on the parking lot. But the building could be located more in the center of the parcel to the east. It doesn't have to go all the way behind those areas that were intended for covered parking. But it could be moved there with far less need for fill in a far shallower grade, and also be substantially closer to the office building. That doesn't mean that's the best place for it in his concern, but it could be done there.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you. So do we have any other board comments or questions?
I just have one more question actually that occurred to me to Mr. Beebe, if possible. I'm just curious as to whether or not I had asked about whether or not his files were required to be stored in paper or if they could be stored digitally. I'm also curious as to whether or not his whether digital or paper, if they're legally required to be stored on site as well, or if they can be stored anywhere.
They could be stored anywhere, Ryan.
Okay, thanks.
But we use our files like for our surveys. I will pull something that I did 20 years ago for reference on things that we're doing today. So
Sure,
storing
absolutely.
them off site it's allowed, it's legal, but it's not practical.
Sure, okay.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I have some. First, the applicant mentioned that this structure is not being stick-built and is being placed on this slab. So if I'm to understand that correctly, it's being built off-site and hauled in, and then therefore could be hauled off. Now, as a builder by trade, that to me is a non-permanent structure. The size of it would dictate that it has to be permitted by the building department. But if truly temporary in nature, because it has no permanent foundation, it is not a permanent structure, and therefore I'm not sure we have the authority to deal with that. That's my first comment. My second comment would be, as I look at the site, it's very clear that the conditions of this site are not of the doing of the applicant. He purchased this site, it was split, and it seems as though we've covered in detail, the concrete slab was poured prior to his ownership by someone else for a similar purpose. Technically a residential application may be filed in error. Regardless of that particular detail, the slab was poured, the grade was changed, and now it's attempting to be used. None of those things that are happening on that site are the doing of the applicant. What is of the doing of the applicant appears to be significant improvements to the site. To get a sidewalk across the front of this site, we always look at it, and I'm not a part of the Sidewalks and Pathways Committee, but as a member of the community, I look at it and think, if no one ever puts the first one in, how do we connect the rest of them? Well, here's an applicant who's putting in a sidewalk that's going to be the foundation, if you will, for future sidewalks in the area. It's an interesting addition, benefit to the community, no doubt. Simple site plan certainly would be a good way to categorize this, but lighting improvements to reduce the halogen lights to go to down lighting. It seems like the applicant is making significant improvements that do provide justice, substantial justice to the community, although this one item doesn't comply. And I want to just kind of mention a point of fact here. This is a big sticking point for me with a lot of the applications I've been a part of reviewing as a member of the ZBA for several years. We talk about, in our ordinance, we talk about an existing legal non-conforming structure. And really what I think the crux of these issues usually is, it's does the request before us increase the level of non-conformity? So that's really what I think we should be looking at. Now, whether this building is built 2 feet away from the principal building as an accessory, or 10 feet, or 20 feet, in no way is it increasing the level of nonconformity, because it's set back to the side yard, which is the most critical point in this application, is still being maintained. In fact, it's increased slightly if I look at the plans from 6.4 feet to 6.6 feet. So it appears as though the side yard setback to the adjacent property, who would be potentially impacted the most, is not receiving undue justice by this variance being granted. So we're simply making a judgment call as to whether 2 feet of separation or 10 feet of separation would somehow make a negative impact. So the question posed previously by Board Member Buckley was, the question of substantial justice. Every request we receive will always offer substantial justice to an applicant if granted, but how does it impact the community? I look at that as substantial justice or significant inconvenience to neighboring properties. And I really don't see the relevance here from a 2-foot to a 10-foot setback in this particular instance. Again, being a variance, the challenge I see is making that case, and we have our criteria to follow. And for me, this is an easy one because of the conditions of this property not being the direct result of the applicant. I don't believe the ZBA is or should be in a position to criticize people's applications and propose how they should build on their own site. I think that we have limits to what we should focus on, and substantial justice to the applicant or significant injustice to a neighbor, I think, is the big focus here. And I think when you look at this project as a whole, with the improvements being proposed by the applicant and this minor setback variance, I see no significant injustice to neighboring tenants. And so for me, this is an easy one that I would be in favor of. But those are my comments as it relates to this item. Does any other member have any comments relative to this application?
I absolutely do. If anybody else does.
Sure.
I would say that I think it's an easy one too, going entirely in the other direction. Apologies, Andy. I disagree with most of what you just said, only from the standpoint of our life is, our role here is not to just simply make life easier or make life less expensive for an applicant. And when we talk about doing justice, we're talking about, it's not a matter of avoiding injustice. It's a matter of doing justice to other people within the township. And so if we do this, we're also setting a precedent for other people that come to us as well, that won't be in such practical situations. And in terms of the cement and the conditions being there, those conditions were there from the get-go. Upon purchase, the applicant knew what those conditions were, knew what those potential, what a potential expansion might want to be, that sort of thing. I don't see how the fact that the conditions were there prior to the purchase, and it's the most convenient place to put it, I don't see how that's a justification for the Zoning Board of Appeals to effectively change our ordinance in this regard, to accommodate that it's the cheapest and most convenient place to put it. That's certainly not what the Zoning Board of Appeals role is. And so when we talk about providing justice to others, I certainly don't, I don't think it meets that. And I think we've established that there are other locations to put it on the site. The fact that the applicant is improving the site, there's no dispute in that. Improving the site is absolutely the case, but we're not here to determine whether or not somebody is improving the site. That's not what our role is, to say, well, they're improving the site and let's let our ordinance slide a little bit because they are making it look prettier than it did before. That's just not what our role is. We've established that it can be, and if it's 50 foot away, it's still a matter of moving those files over. It's moving them 50 feet as opposed to moving them 2 feet. So it's not as though the other alternative makes it less practical to use. It just simply is at a distance away from the existing site. And, I guess in my mind, one of the reasons I was asking about, I certainly understand the practical needs associated with running a business. But in terms of the justification for doing this is to expand, to be able to use files and to be able to place those files somewhere nearby because they have to be retained. I get that. Right now, they currently are, from my understanding, and I might be wrong, but they currently are on site. They're currently stored. I get that not all of them are digitized. I get that none of them are digitized. But moving forward, there is an opportunity in this day and age to digitize everything. And so the suggestion that it must be stored and the space it must be there for something that could be digitized is not as compelling to me in terms of granting a variation on our ordinance, which is really intended to be rare. I mean, we literally just updated our ordinance, and so I don't see anything to me that outside of the fact that we're making it cheaper, more economical for the applicant. I don't see anything else that prevents the applicant from accomplishing what they're choosing to accomplish within the current ordinance.
Does anyone have any other comments?
Ryan just pretty much put into perspective what I was thinking. I'm thinking totally along his lines too after reading through all this.
It looks like the applicant raised his hand. do we want to give him a chance to respond to that?
Well, this is the trouble that I have here, and we will take the response from the applicant, but the ZBA in recent history here has appeared to take the position that we know better than an applicant how they should build. And in response to Ryan's comments about financial impact, as is the Zoning Board of Appeals, we cannot consider that for nor against. And I don't think we have in this instance. I don't believe, I'm not looking at this from a standpoint of cost. It's irrelevant to me where a building is built, but our job is to look at what an applicant presents. It's not to design their site or weigh what the cost of their project may or may not be. I would not agree with that at all. I also think in terms of the comment about precedence, precedence doesn't come into play here at all, because every case is handled individually, and our decisions on any variance request or text interpretation does not constitute a future approval or denial, and cannot be used as grounds for an applicant to submit to us for any such request, because precedence is not something that can be taken into account by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I'm personally going to be standing firm in support of the applicant. It sounds like there's some difference of opinion here, and that's good. That's why we're doing this. But at this time, I would like to allow the applicant to address any of these comments.
Andy, can I? I apologize, Andy. Can I speak to one issue first? And the issue of designing or telling an applicant where to build or taking into consideration expense, I agree 100% with you. That's not my job. That's not the Zoning Board of Appeals job. Our job is to determine whether or not they require the level of justice that they're asking for today based on what we see, what the site looks like, and based on the details of that site. And we do have to look at that. That is something we have to ask ourselves. Can they do this within our existing ordinance, or can they only do this, what they're trying to accomplish, with a variance? That is the real question. It's not my concern at all what it costs. This is the voluntary choice by the applicant. The other issue that I guess I would question is the idea of it taking precedence. If we establish a variance, we are saying that this is how we've interpreted our ordinance. And so I'm not sure how that isn't relevant to any other thing, that might come across our table. It's when we give a variance, we are, unless I'm wrong, again, Rodney can correct me. If we give a variance, we are essentially changing our ordinance. Our interpretation is a change.
For you, Ryan, and we look at our draft motions, item 5, non-conforming use of neighboring land, structures, buildings in the same zoning district and permitted use of land, structures, or buildings in other zoning districts have not in any way been considered as grounds for the issuance of this variance. So a variance is that it's assessing the individual characteristics of a given application and then making the determination. It's not a forfeiture of the ordinance. It's to say the conditions that exist with this particular parcel for this particular application, for whatever those conditions may be, is unique, and is unique enough in a way that we feel as a Zoning Board of Appeals that it should be justifiably permitted to have this variance. So precedent cannot ever be considered. It's human nature to understand things have been done in the past and might want to be done again, but it's not permitted for us to consider that, nor is it allowed as an application, a reason for an application. So I don't want to, go back and forth in a banter with you and I only tonight. I think it's okay that we have difference of opinions. I think that's, as I said earlier, that's good. I think it's important that the ZBA analyze things from all angles. But I did want to jump back to the applicant who has raised his hand some time ago.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Am I allowed?
Yes,
Is it? Okay. I just wanted to make sure, Ryan had said that I was moving the files out there and whether it was 2 feet or 50 feet. Actually, my intent is not to move the files. The files need to remain inside the building where they are. What I'm looking at is the most northerly garage bay. We have quads, we have a small workshop in there for fixing equipment. We have storage of our wood stakes, our irons, things of that sort. That's what I want to put in the shed. I just didn't want you to think that I was building this because of those files. I've lost one of my bays. That's my choice to move the files out there. They didn't have to be in a heated office area. So we put the file cabinets out in that first bay. I heard you say that. That's not what I'm doing. The other thing is, Andy said that it's built off site, and it may or may not be built off site. The Amish may come in and stick build it there, but it is built on a there's 4x4s, and then there's a 3/4 inch ply that goes on top of it, and it sits on and is not attached to the concrete. Yes, it can be lifted back onto a truck and taken, but with a 16-foot, you run into, and this is what they're telling me, they have to do a lot more with trucking and flag when you go from 14 to 60. So it's a difficulty for them. So they may do it either way. I'm just not sure which way. And I don't want somebody to say, well, it was stated that it was built off site. They may come and build it on site. I don't know that. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear, and but my intent is to have it so that it is not attached. So
Thank you for that clarification.
as far, and I can talk to you about the grade on the site and moving. When you put a building up, you would want to try and have it flat. This slab that is there, which was put there specifically to put a structure on, was made for that. The parking lot where Rodney's talking about, yes, it could be moved to the east side. If you take a look at the grades of the parking lot, what I'm going to end up doing is having to fill within my parking lot, and then I'll have a straight drop off. So it's not that easy. And now we're talking about redoing a parking lot so that I can get a shed put on. It's the same thing as taking it down, and having to build a drive down to the north end of the property so that I can put it down there. There's practical difficulties on the site, and that's something that you can take into account with your variances.
Tim, thank you. Mr. Beebe, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was rambling.
Any other questions or comments? If not, and I guess I'm directing that to you, Liz, because the rest of us have spoken. If not, I would like to take a motion for either approval, denial, or approval with conditions. I don't want to just take this and offer my motion, so I'm opening it to accept a motion. But one of the things that I am considering is there's another accessory building on this site already to the south of the principal structure. I'm wondering if it would be feasible for us to ask the applicant as a condition to remove that secondary accessory building in lieu of, removing that secondary accessory structure in allowing this other one with the variance. That would be where my mindset would go. But I've spoken enough tonight, so I'll take a motion for approval or denial if there is such. Is anyone prepared to make a motion for or against?
I'm prepared.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion. Sorry. I'd like to make a motion to deny the PVA R 2102 application from Timothy and Lori Beebe for an 8-foot setback variance for the minimum 10 feet requirement from the other buildings by section 7.5.C.2 D of the zoning ordinance to allow for construction of a new detached accessory building on the 1-acre parcel number 14-021-30-013-01 at 2257 East Broomfield Road in the B4 General Business District and in the southwest quarter of section 21 after review of the variance criteria in section 14.4.B.4 of the zoning ordinance and finding that 1, the expired building permit PB 1800103 is not germane to this case because it was for a residential accessory structure that was issued prior to the land division that created this parcel under the former zoning ordinance number 1991-5 that is no longer in effect. 2, to be able to make use of an existing concrete pad would be a convenience for the applicant, but this existing condition does not constitute a practical difficulty to construction where elsewhere on the lot and does not justify the requested variance. 3, there are currently 2 buildings on the parcel that do not fully meet setback requirements in B4 district. If the variance is granted, this would add a 3rd building that does not fully meet setback requirements in the zoning district. The existence of legal non-conforming structures on the parcel is not a valid reason to grant the requested variance. 4, granting the variance would only give justice to the applicant and not to the owners of other parcels in the area or the B4 district. 5, although the applicant has a preferred location and there are some topographic challenges to the development on the northern portion of the parcel, there are reasonable alternative locations on the parcel and adjacent to the existing developed area where the proposed accessory building can be constructed in a manner that fully conforms to the standards of section 7.5 accessory uses, buildings and structures. 6, the problems and resulting need for a variance are directly a result of the applicant's actions and choices.
I'll second that.
Did we lose Andy?
I'm still here. I'm sorry. I had a motion, Ryan, second, Judy, for
Yes.
denial. I'm not as it relates to discussion, I am not in favor of denial for my previously stated reasons. Is there other discussion?
I'm
Hearing
with
none.
you, Andy. I'm not in favor of denial either, but I don't know that it matters at this point. So,
Well, if that's the case, we'll go ahead and vote. And I'm going to take it as a roll call since we're having some technical difficulties here. If we could, Ryan, you obviously made the motion to deny. I'm assuming you're in favor of your motion to deny. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Judy, you've seconded that motion for denial. I'm assuming you're still in favor of that motion. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I am opposed to the motion of denial. Liz, are you for the motion to deny or against the motion to deny?
I am against the motion to deny.
So we have a 4-person voting board tonight, and we are tied 2-2 on this particular motion. Is there anyone who would like to make a alternative motion that wouldn't be just resulting in another 2-2 vote? Is there any conditions that we could impose as a board that would satisfy either the denial motion maker and seconder, or the Liz or myself? I offered the previous condition thought about removing 1 accessory building. I don't know if anyone found any merit in that. I'm guessing not, based on the way the vote went out, but are there other conditions that anyone would like to throw out as a potential to help sway a vote?
I would be willing to consider a withdrawal of my motion if there was a desire to postpone action until a point at which we had a tie-breaking vote, 5 members actually here.
I'd agree with that.
So we would have a new motion by Ryan to postpone. We don't have to withdraw. You don't have to withdraw your previous motion because we voted on it and it's tied. So I think by Robert's
correct
order, we will be moving to accept a new motion proposing to postpone until we had a 5th voting member that would vote either for or against this application. And we have a second by Judy. That to me does make sense. I think I could see the merit in that. If we want to vote on that, is there other discussion before we take a vote on that new motion? So we've got a motion to postpone until a 5th voting member can be present, and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to postpone, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think we had everybody in favor of that. We are 4 votes in favor of proposing until we have a 5th tie-breaking member present. Rodney, can you help us navigate through the process as it will relate to the status of this variance request for the applicant?
So at this point, as you said, the matter is postponed. There are 2 things going on. Obviously, we have one alternate, Mr. LaBelle, who was not here tonight, who could provide that 5th vote at a future meeting. What we will do as staff is we'll send out and do a poll to make sure that members can be at all 5 members can be at the next available meeting. The other factor that comes into play is that the supervisor is working tirelessly to try to find and fill those vacant seats. So if we can identify people who are willing to serve, that is the other way that we can fill that 5th seat. So the both of those things are going on right now, and so by the time of your January meeting or February meeting, depending on timing, we should be able to have a full board of 5 voting members present. Anyway, we'll work on that, and we will certainly make sure before this is set on an agenda that we've confirmed that 5 members will be available.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you to the applicant for coming before us tonight, and apologize that we're not able to reach a decision, but in the interest of due process, we will postpone and reconvene and get you a final decision for or against your request, as Rodney stated. At this time, being 8:02, we will close the public hearing on the variance request 21-02. Next item of new business is approval of the annual report to go before the Planning Commission. I'm not sure that we have any major topics here. Typically in the past, staff has helped write a summary report and draft view for us to review, comment, and return. Has a draft report been started at all by Rodney or Peter that we might look to review?
It's actually in your packet. If you turn,
I think I missed that.
yeah, it's on page 22 of your packet. And basically, it notes the three items that you had that you considered this year. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about this proposed annual report?
I have none.
It
Judy or
seems
Liz?
straightforward. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Nope.
I have no comments.
So the only change that will be made is that our December 1st meeting, the variance request was listed as variance 21-03 on the report, but in all of our packet information, it was referenced as 21-02. So I would ask staff to verify the correct number there. I think it is 3.
It is 3. Yes, that was an error on our report.
Yeah, our previous information for tonight's agenda referenced it as 02. So the record will reflect that was actually 03, and we're not going to redo this whole meeting. But 03 is correct as the report states. And so it will state that this variance request was postponed until a full 5-member board can be convened. That would be the only change I could see making. If everyone is in favor of that, I would take a motion to accept the proposed annual report with the postponement clarification made for variance request 21-03.
So moved.
Motion by Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Judy?
Yes.
Ryan and Judy. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Next item of new business would be C, adoption of the 2022 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting calendar. That would be found on page 23 is our scheduled meetings. So if we look at our ZBA request, first Wednesday of each month, I'll be honest, I haven't studied my calendar enough to know of any specific conflicts, but it is our standard first Wednesday along with our joint meeting listed for March 29th. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve our scheduled meetings for 2022 as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the meetings as presented.
Motion, Judy. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second, Liz. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries. Moving down the agenda, number 9, other business. I am not aware of any other business. If any board member has other business, please state so. Being none, move to extended public comment, item 10. Let the record reflect extended public comment is open at 8:07. As a reminder, it's restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. Rodney, do we still have Mr. Beebe on or any other members of the public who may want to speak at
Yes,
extended public comment?
Yes, we do have Mr. Beebe on, and he has his hand raised, so he has the floor.
Okay, all I wanted to do was invite the members out to stand at the property and take a look at how existing grade and where buildings would need to go. So I don't, you may have come to the office when I wasn't there or after hours, but the invitation is there. If you would like to come out, be happy to have you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any other members of the public wishing to speak at extended public comment? I'm assuming that's a no, and we will close extended public comment at 8:08. Final board comment. I'll lead us off here. I think we had a good discussion tonight. I regret that we weren't able to reach a definitive answer for the applicant, but I think, as I stated several times, it's good to have that discussion, and I appreciate the dialogue. I think this board has always done a good job at having healthy discussions when members may be at difference of opinions. And so I would encourage everyone to continue to speak their piece and do so in a decent and reasonable manner. And I think we do a good job at that. And I think we have an important job to do. And so hearing all bits of information from an applicant or staff or from fellow members is critical to the process. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate everyone's input.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. I would add on to your comments. I appreciate your comments, and I would just add on that I appreciate everyone had a willingness tonight to be willing to postpone so we can give fair consideration to this issue with a fifth member, rather than maybe trying to have to I guess kind of go back and forth too much on an issue that has elicited some different opinions. So I do appreciate everybody's flexibility to kind of give it its due consideration and try to get that fifth person here so we can get a full vote on it.
Liz, anything before I move to director comments?
No, all sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, Rodney?
Just one quick item, and that is that it is quite likely that the next time we meet, it will be in person in the Township Hall boardroom, because our authority to hold electronic meetings under the Open Meetings Act is coming to an end with the end of the calendar year. And it does not appear at this point that the state legislature has any interest to extend that authority. There are several bills in Lansing to extend it various ways, but none of those bills have gone anywhere so far. It's still possible they may do something last minute, but right now it appears that likely that it would be moving back to in-person meetings. So with that in mind, if any of the board members have a concern about doing that, we can certainly contact me individually. We can talk about that and what options there might be. Certainly for the township, we will provide masks if you need one. We'll do our best with social distancing in our boardroom, but it does appear that we're going to be moving back to that process.
Thank you, Rodney. At this time, without any other comments, I am looking for adjournment at 8:11. It switched right on me there. I was thinking it said 8:09, but I looked closely and it was actually not 8:10, it's 8:11. So we are adjourned at 8:11. Thank you, everyone. And we will look for that next meeting update from staff.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.